All right, all right. Welcome back to another episode of the Behind the Back podcast. We are your host. I'm Marcus Conan Negron, and beside me, as always, is Ben the Jet Retz. Ben, how you doing, brother?
I'm doing good, man. It's a rainy day in Sacramento right now, and rain is my favorite weather, so I'm feeling
Nice.
pretty good.
Got it. That's great. So we have a lot to break down this week, and before we get into it, please, if you want to watch us on video, go ahead and follow us on YouTube. We have a whole link for the Behind the Back podcast. Our link is in the description below. But as if you want to keep listening to us on audio, Spotify, Amazon, Apple Podcasts, you can catch us there. So let's get into the main deal today. We're going to break down the week that has happened for the Sacramento Kings. We're recording on Saturday. It's a little later than we normally would have. Our week was kind of hectic, so we kind of had to adjust for it. But it worked out great because the last game of the week was last night against Minnesota. But let's backtrack a bit and kind of just discuss the up and down week that this one was for the Sacramento Kings. So we went 2-2, and our first win came against the Clippers on ESPN. And there was a lot of good and bad from that game. And I guess from the Sacramento fan perspective of things, some people would say the ESPN broadcasting was bad. I think from with Bob Myers, I forgot the lady who he was with. I like the lady. She was nice. I think her name is Beth. But Bob Myers, you could definitely tell the Warriors fandom was involved in that one. Um, but I liked what we really needed to start this week off strong. And we hadn't beat the Clippers yet this year. So we really needed to kind of shake that monkey off. So what did you really like if there were some takeaways from the Clippers game? Anything that stood out to you?
Honestly, like the biggest thing for me in that game was just the intensity that the Kings brought to the game. I felt like from from kind of the beginning to the end, they brought a playoff level intensity, which is something that we kind of need to see in the last 20 25, 27 games now. Like this team just needs to be aggressive night in and night out, and you have to be hungry for a win no matter the team you're playing, because you're not locked in a position at any point. Like you're battling with a bunch of teams for not just a playoff spot, but a play-in spot at this point, like in terms of just having home court advantage for those games. So I really like the intensity they brought there, and it was promising. It made me feel like, especially considering we beat the Spurs coming out of the break, like, okay, we're rolling in a way, like we just beat the Clippers. Let's take our efforts to the next game and see what happens. And so overall, that game, like, it was a good one. It was fun to watch too.
Yeah, I agree. I think that was like a good step up game for our all stars. Like Foxy obviously had a really good game. He seemed in control the whole time. He kind of had his imprint on the game, was getting in James Harden's way. I think they didn't have Paul George, but again, at the end of the day, I don't think that takes anything away from the loss because this has been the reality is this might be a version of the Clippers that even if we don't play them in the playoffs, they're going to end up playing most likely. I doubt their whole team's actually going to be healthy in a 7-game series. And that's always going to be the issue that they have to fight off. So we forced Kawhi to just be the only one to kind of do anything. And I think it really worked out. They weren't hitting their threes, and we were doing a good job blitzing them and just kind of mucking things up a bit. So
Yeah, and I really liked the star production we got from Domas and Deer, and like Domas having 17 points, 12 assists, 15 rebounds, and then Foxy following it with 33 points and 7 assists. Like that's the kind of stat line you need from your star players at a point like this in a game like this. So that was really good to see, especially considering Malik on 28 minutes was kind of struggling in this one. Like it wasn't like last year's matchup almost exactly a year to date where it was 177 to 175 or whatever.
right.
Like I think Malik in that game had like 42 and Foxy had 43. But in this one, Monk only had 12 points. And one thing like we talked about before on and off the pod is if Malik's not having a good game, it's tough for the Kings right now to find a win. Like especially if either De'Aaron or Domas are struggling in that game. Like
hmm
if one of those two is struggling, we need the big game from Malik. So it was really good to see the two stars pop off.
Yeah, I think, and another thing, like we mentioned, when it wasn't Malik, fortunately, Kevin and HB had a really good game. They stepped up and made some big plays. I had Keegan offensively; he wasn't making the biggest spark, but his job was to guard Kawhi most of the game, and I think he did a really good job of just. I think the team in general did a really good job defending in this one, and you could tell the intensity was there. The refs, I think, did a decent job for most of the game. Um, and there was the turning point of the game I felt, and I texted you guys about this, was once Foxy got teed up, and I believe it was in the second half, and Fox got fouled or got called for a foul on James Harden while defending him, and he flung his arms and kind of upset. They teed him up right away, and which is funny because Bob Myers on the broadcast said, "Oh, that's an automatic technical," and I'm wondering, like, we see that in a lot of games, and it's not actually as automatic as it seems. It's just interesting to me, but it might have been what Foxy said at the same time. Who knows? But after that moment, Foxy took it personally. And it seemed like we've seen this sometimes throughout his career where he gets upset, like visibly upset, almost like Russell Westbrook esque, and he just takes over the game. And after that, Foxy makes a couple good buckets. He's locking down James Harden on 2 straight possessions. One was a steal, the other was a jump ball, and you're just watching him pump his chest and just get really into it. And that's, again, what you want to see from your leader. It's
Yeah.
nice seeing Fox that way sometimes because he doesn't always get that way. And I think as he picks and chooses the level of intensity based off of the importance of the game. I think it's national TV. He's on it. Like he felt like he had to show out a little more this game.
And that kind of thing is promising from a point of making the playoffs because you then can trust that Fox is going to show up for all either 4 or 7 games, like he's going to bring that intensity through every game at that point. It
Mm-hmm.
is it is kind of frustrating from a fan perspective because you're like, why can't you just do this night in and night out? You'd be one of the best players in the league every night if you did that. But I do kind of get it. You're conserving your body, you're conserving your energy. Like it's kind of a medium point, but I get it.
Yeah, you have to figure it out. And I think he's getting better, especially now that the Kings are progressing more and more. He's learning how to keep his body ready and pick and choose when to go all out on the way to the playoffs before we get to the playoffs, and then he just turns up. So
Yeah.
I and again, Domas and so Foxy did a great job. And then on Domas's end, I knew that Zubac was going to be a tough matchup. And early on, Domas was just having trouble hitting some bunnies. He missed some easy ones, like it was
He
bad.
did.
I didn't think that was so much Zubac. I think that was more Domas just kind of missing some easy ones. But the offense still was running really well. And I think the funny commentary that was mentioned was with Bob Myers was when Bob was mentioning Domas and they're like, "Oh, this team runs through him, right?" And then after in the fourth quarter when they took Fox out, he was and Domas was in. He was like, "Oh, well, what now? They took Fox out, so what's going to happen with the offense? Who's going to score?" And I thought that was hilarious because it's Malik and Domas in a 2-man game, and they took over at the end there, and
Yeah.
Fox didn't even have to come back in to finish. Because I know at the time Fox was rolling, and we were kind of nervous about it. We were like, why are you taking Fox out now? Like he's cooking, you should probably let him do it." And we ended up not needing him the rest of the way. So at the end of the day, I thought again that was just a good collective team effort defensively, especially to hold that team, because you could tell with James Harden, he settled. Like once kind of Foxy was getting in his grill and early on his shots weren't going down, James Harden was checked out. Like he just didn't seem like he wanted anything to do with it. So I thought a big key was that we played physical, and when the Kings choose to play physical consistently, we get in these teams' heads because they're not
Yeah.
expecting us to be physical, and it's just interesting. We'll talk about that later on as for the other victory, but that's something with the Clippers game that I really liked that they came out, and I was like, if this is the version we get in the playoffs, we can hang with any team. So
Yeah. My last point on this game is Harrison Barnes ended the game with 22 points on 36 minutes.
good night.
It was a great night for him. And there's a part of me that feels, I think Mike Brown has said before, like they don't draw up plays for Harrison.
Right.
And sometimes I watch these games where Harrison gets some ISO plays where he's just backing someone down in the post, or it's a kick out to the corner and he's wide open. Like he puts himself in great spots. I feel like there comes points in the game where we should be leaning on Harrison Barnes a little bit more. And he can get a bucket. Like he's always kind of done that throughout his career. When he was in Golden State, he was leaned on more than he is on this team to go and get a bucket when, Steph or Clay were either out of the game or they were being guarded and double teamed. You know what I mean? Like he was definitely, I wouldn't say the third option, but he was close to it at times.
Right.
And so I see games like this where he has 22 points, plays 36 minutes, and is just a consistent option for us. And I'm like, why don't we draw up plays for him more? But then I remember kind of his age and the role that he has on this team, and I realize the 2-man game that Malik and Domas run, it makes sense for him to be that option out on the corners, because what better way to set yourself up and set your team up for success than to plant yourself in a corner and let two of the better players on the court with you at the same time run a 2-man game and figure out navigate the next best option. So I I was happy to see Harrison get involved in this game. He got us some timely buckets, ended some runs that the Clippers were on, and at least got us, slowed the bleeding at times.
Right.
So awesome to see. And I feel like coming out of the All-Star break, he's been a little more consistent. So I'm hoping to see that down the stretch too.
Yeah, agreed. And I think HB, like you mentioned, he's gotten to the role and to the point of his career where he kind of knows when the team needs a bucket, when they need him to just kind of, oh hey, drive to the rim this possession and see if you can get something. If you're the one who can create in the last, if he gets the ball with 5 seconds to go on the shot clock, he's someone who can create for himself in a pinch. So I do think that I'm okay with that being his role. And if he's hitting his threes, then he's even more valuable. And that's all we can really ask for Harrison at this point. And we just need him to continue to stay as consistent as he can defensively. Obviously, at his age, he can't keep up the way he used to. Um, but in a game like the Clippers, he did a really good job. So I was happy with him. Kevin did a good job shooting the ball in this one too. So I just think the effort collectively was there, and that was a big difference for us to win this game.
Yeah. So good night there. Got a good dub in LA. We took our efforts then back down I-5 and came back home the next night against the Heat. Now that game was a little bit of a different story. What was the story in that one, Marcos?
So, as the Kings historically recently have been struggling with, we have this slight issue where we played down to the level of our opponent. And I'm not saying that the Heat are a bad team at all. The Heat are a good team. They were in the finals last year. But the version of the Heat that we were given that night on Monday was without Jimmy Butler, without Tyler Hero, without Thomas Bryant, without a lot of their guys due to the mixture of injuries and suspension. Like Terry Rozier was out as well. Josh Richardson was out. Guys who helped beat us last time were out. And it was just Bam, Duncan Robinson, Jaime Jaquez Jr., and Highsmith, like a couple of these other guys. And it was up to them to bring the effort. So we were playing their B team, and as the Kings like to do against B teams is deliver a D plus effort. So
Yeah.
I from this one, it was frustrating because it just felt like, and obviously back to back, that's still not an excuse in the NBA level. Like we were better, like we were in a better position. We had our healthy team ready to go, and the Heat came out and played with the effort that made them a championship team. Like they are known to play like that, and guys step up. I think Jaime Jaquez did a really good job. That rookie's got some game. He's gonna be a
Yeah.
very consistent player in this league. Very Keegan-esque in terms of just kind of like his role on the team. He's I think he's a little bit more of a, they've given him more of a green light dynamic shooter, like create from the post type thing. That was always his game in college. Um, and he was awesome. And Bam obviously did a really good job. Domas, he got a triple double in this one too, didn't he? Because he
Yeah.
got another double double or a triple double. I wasn't
He got
entirely
a he
sure,
got a
but
triple double. Yeah, he had
yeah.
14 points, 10 assists, 14 rebounds on
But
40 minutes.
it just felt inconsistent. Like Bam
He
did a
did.
good job of just giving him the works. And obviously in this game, Fox messed up his knee. Him and Jaime ran into each other, so it was a left knee contusion that's kept him out these past couple games here. But he played through it, and um, again, Keegan had a good night too. Like that, this was a good Keegan game. But again, it just felt like I don't know if it was a mixture of just being worn out or we just we got down big and then we waited to get down big to make a move. And we got
Yeah.
close, but it just never felt like we were in it.
I can live with Jaime Jaquez and Bam kind of torching us for a game, especially if we have a little bit more production from our stars. Obviously, it was a rough night for Domas, and Foxy was on and off, but ultimately ended the game pretty well. But what really bugged me about the 8-man rotation that the Heat had going, basically, was that Kevin Love on 15 minutes had 19 points, and he was, I talked about in the Clippers game about Harrison Barnes getting timely buckets and stopping runs. Like Kevin Love was that version of HB against us in this one. Like
Yeah.
he every run that we had to try and get back into a game, we'd go on a little 8-0 streak. Kevin Love would make another timely bucket. And it seemed like we almost forgot that, this vet kind of still knows how to play a game, he knows how to play ball.
Yeah.
And um it's upsetting from that regard because when you look at the guy on the other side of it, you're like, this should be an easy matchup. You should be working him all game long. So it does seem like the Kings, not only do they struggle with inconsistently being ready to go game in and game out against whoever's on the other side, they also struggle to guard other players separate from the stars. It's like they game plan decently well for whoever the stars are on the other team, but they completely forget about the role players or even the bench players.
Mhm.
It just seems like for years now, not just this year, last year, like it seems like for a long time we've been beat by not just the stars of other teams, but by somebody you shouldn't know their name. And it seems
Yeah.
like I've learned so many names just off of them torching the Kings. And that is frustrating from this perspective because like you do a good job in certain games shutting these big names down, but you also have to find ways to stop the other production players. And that's where I think this team struggles the most, and that's bringing that consistency.
Yeah, it's the overall defense was a problem. And I thought, and it's just an effort thing. And it seemed like once we got down big, it was kind of, we're going to live and die by the three. And we caught up by using the three and being aggressive. And I just, again, it's that inconsistency. Honestly, I thought going into this, I was like, if there was any game we were actually going to lose, like, where we thought we were going to win and we're going to lose, it was going to be this one, given the fact that everyone was out back to back. I was just like, I would not be surprised if we lost this one and then won the other two. And, that was almost like the equivalent of like a trap game. But
Yep.
this one was disappointing because, we came off a good win. We had the fifth spot at that point, and after that, we're right back at seventh. And uh, we really needed to. It felt like if we wanted a 3-1 week, that was the one that we needed to win for sure, and it just didn't work
Definitely.
out. Didn't work out that way. And then when we move on to the Denver game, and it felt like all systems were a go. We came out hot, got a 15-point lead, and then in a matter of 4 minutes, all of a sudden it was the Denver show. They took over. Jamal and Joker were destroying us, and it just that one it almost felt like we gave up for a second. We tried and we weren't totally out of it the whole time, but it was Keegan got going right away, and I think after that it's like they stopped going to him, and it was really weird. And
Yeah.
I think the Kings do that sometimes. I think that's a system issue. I think that with all these guys who can score, but when there's that many mouths to feed in this style of offense, it's tough for certain players not named Keegan or De'Aaron or Domas to develop a rhythm. And that's where I see Keegan kind of get lost in the fold sometimes, because the game where he exploded, it was like we're giving the ball to Keegan and you just do what you want with it. And he doesn't get very many chances to have those kind of games. And I think that's still a product of the role he's being asked to play, with him being the main defender on this team. And I don't think that's a level of development that we're, you know, that's something that us as fans weren't anticipating yet. Like we weren't sure exactly how much better Keegan was going to go. What was the next step Keegan had to take? Um, and I thought that I knew that his offense after he started off as kind of the main defender during the season, I was like at the beginning of the season, I was like, this is going to be Keegan's role this year, and next
Hmm.
year or the year after, I think he's really when we're going to start seeing him get used to it and just be able to kind of create his own more consistently. And but in this game, it just felt like we needed him to kind of go. De'Aaron wasn't in this game, and we need more consistency out of players not named De'Aaron, and usually that could be Malik. Um, and I think something we'll talk about later is that Davion was the starter in this one, and most recently when De'Aaron was out, Keon Ellis was the starter, and at least in the ones that we were winning when De'Aaron was out, Keon kind of was the starter, and in this one, it just never felt like we could get anything going after they went on their run. After they went on their run, it was kind of over.
Yeah, yeah, that was kind of the thing is when we started this game against Denver, we opened it up kind of like we were Miami. We it was very much so a yeah, we're missing our star player, but we're a team and we still know we're damn good. Like we're gonna bring our all. And they ended the first quarter with a 7 point lead, and then throughout the second quarter, we're doing really well up until I think about with like 4 or 5 minutes left in the second quarter when we started letting Denver go on like a 30 something to like 5 run. It was insane. It was
Yeah.
this massive run that just completely blew us out of the water. Like we were down by what was it, like 10 or something like that
Hmm.
at half.
By
So we were
half, yeah.
down 10 at half. Yeah.
It was
And then
quick.
third quarter, you kind of at that point you've got to go into half and be like, all right, it's a new ball game. We know we have some ground to make up, but let's go try and take control of this game and get back in it. And they did the complete opposite. And
Yeah.
Denver looked like the team that was Miami, and they had all their guys ready to go. And this was the first time this season I think that we've seen a full Denver squad. So
Yeah.
that was also something to kind of consider as we start talking about playoff matchups and stuff. Um, but yeah, then Denver has a 35-point third quarter, and we have a 17-point third quarter, and that was just where this game was over at that point. There was a play where Aaron Gordon got this like wide open dunk
Oh
with
yeah.
like
He just
three
walked
kings.
right by him.
Yeah, with like three kings right there, and that was the point. I was like, yeah, like they don't want to finish this game,
Hmm.
and I didn't. I guess fortunately didn't get to watch most of this game, but just the little highlights that I saw and then some snippets here and there, it was just super frustrating to see kind of the lack of effort. And I know Mike Brown has talked about how this Kings team, they won't give up. I mean, shoot, they came back from um, a big deficit this year. We've seen them do it a couple times, and they've come up short a couple times, but they've also won. And so, like that this team doesn't necessarily give up, but when you see that kind of stuff happen, you get this sense of like it almost feels like there's no return. And obviously, no matter the points, a loss is a loss. Like you lose by 2 points, 1 point, you lose by 40, it's still one loss. But you got to really like every win and every loss means so much more at this point in the season, as we all know. And getting blown out does feel a little more frustrating at this point in the season, especially against these teams that you could see in a 4 to 7 game series later. Like,
Yeah.
so that was unfortunate to see, especially because we were so confident against Denver. We were running them this season.
Right. And Foxy being out was a huge deal, and
Absolutely.
I think that had an impact. I think him like Jamal had an easy game, and it
Yeah.
at least it felt like it. He was hitting everything. He was making tough shots, and good Jamal game. And I know that playoff Jamal is a totally real thing, and that would be an interesting matchup in that sense. But playoff Foxy could end up being a real thing if he's given the opportunity, because we saw last year how
Yeah.
he elevated. Um, but I wasn't, at that for that game in particular. I kind of figured that after Fox was out, I was like, this is going to be a tough one to win. Especially like no team wants to get swept, and especially a championship team. Like they know they have been waking up since the All Star break as well. I think they're still undefeated since the All Star break, and it's that's just how it goes for these teams who have been there and done that, and that's part of the expectation, especially when you have the MVP on your roster. So
Right.
I thought and I thought a funny little takeaway from this was, Sabonis continued his streak in this game, even though it seemed like going into the fourth quarter he was at 13-9. He'd gotten hit in the face by his own teammate, by Mason Jones, and you wonder if if he's gonna come back in. And some fan bases would, the Denver fan base kind of came at the Kings one and said, "Oh, you're letting Sabonis come in and stat pad and get his streak going." But at the same time, Jamal Murray played the first 8 minutes of the fourth quarter, and
Right.
I'm like, okay, so you're just letting your superstar point guard, who could also get hurt, play the whole fourth, whatever. So I just
Yeah.
think it's funny, the standards that teams like to hold. Screw it, like, if we were gonna get anything, let's get Domas the streak. It's just one rebound. It's not like he was chasing, like, 4 assists or something like that, where it was a little unnecessary. But I
Yeah.
mean,
No, I totally agree. One last like frustrating thing about this game too, and it kind of goes back to, uh, I guess it leads into this game, but it goes
Mhm.
back a ways, is the fluctuations of minutes on this team, specifically in this regard, Keon Ellis. You and I have talked about how much we like Keon. Like, we love what he brings on a defensive end. We like what he brings on the offensive end. He's not like an offensive threat per se, but
Yeah,
he's a
not yet.
little more of a liability for an opposing defense um, than Davion Mitchell per se, right? Like, it's, I guess, from a consistency standpoint, you see Keon versus Davion, and you're probably going to close out on Keon a little bit more than you would on Davion.
Mhm.
So from that regard, I guess, like, for me, like, I'm frustrated because I see Keon get shelved, top shelf, for I guess like 4 or 5 games in a row. And then he'll play like 8 minutes in garbage time. And then he'll play like, if Foxy goes out or someone's out or whatever the situation, he'll play like 20 plus minutes. And it's hard. I feel like I kind of want to see Keon get like a run of 20 games straight of
Right.
consistent, at least 15 minutes, to just kind of find an NBA rhythm and see what he can bring to this team, because he's got more length than Davion. I still think Davion's a better defender, but he doesn't have the respect of the referees yet, just as an NBA player. And so he doesn't get a lot of
Right.
those defensive calls. Like, he gets calls against him that probably aren't calls for other people. And
Yeah.
so from that regard, like, I would bank on Keon just because he can bring a physical aspect to it a little bit better than Davion, and not get certain calls because he can just, put his body into things a little bit more.
Yeah.
So I feel like there's certain matchups and certain games where it makes a little more sense for Keon to be out there than Davion. But I don't know if it's a veteran, because you can't call Davion a veteran, but he has more experience in the NBA than Keon. He's been a part of this system for a little bit longer. I guess Mike Brown kind of trusts Davion a little bit more in that regard, but even Davion's minutes fluctuate like crazy. And so I
Yeah.
kind of just want Mike to make a decision, like run with one or the other, and I would rather it be Keon. I don't know. I don't know what your stance is. I have an idea, but
Yeah, I think the obvious thing for the Keon versus Davion argument is, I think defensively, I don't think it's that far of a gap with what they both have to offer. I think Davion is a more shifty player, but Keon it has more length and he offers more switchability and a little bit more versatility. I think naturally Keon is a very good defender. And
mhm.
um if you're starting him at just the backup point guard, or in this case, and we'll talk about it in a second here. And when he starts in place of De'Aaron, you can tell the switchability is actually a little bit smoother. And Davion can get picked on a little bit more often due to his size. And I think that Keon is physical enough and he will contest enough. Like, we saw this back in the in-season tournament when we were up against Oklahoma City without Fox, and we started Keon, and Keon was tasked with guarding SGA for the majority of the game, and he did a really good job on him. And I think he's the kind of guy that you could see, if you gave him more of a run and just allow him more in the defensive rotation, he can change the game that way. And there are times where he was building his confidence earlier in the season, where he had a little run where he played like 8 to 10 straight games, and he was attempting more shots and trying to find his rhythm. And then you're on the bench for 3 weeks. And it's like, what do you really do here? And we saw Duarte get hurt, and now he's getting some minutes. And I don't mind the size of it all. Like the concept is the same, and he's more physical and he can handle that. But agreed, we need more of a rotation that's like kind of set in stone. I think early on in the season, it's not as big as a deal, but you're in the stretch run and you kind of need to figure out what matchups you're going to get in the playoffs. And if you have a guy who's good for most matchups, you might as well get him more minutes. Like Davion
Right.
won't work in every matchup. It's been shown. And Keon has more of an ability to be matched up. If you pair him with Monk, where Monk is the primary ball handler and scorer, I mean, Keon's in most lineups has been pretty good this year. So I do wish that we saw more of a run with Keon. And so we'll transition here. We did get that opportunity. He started in this game, this last game that we saw last night, overtime win against the Minnesota Timberwolves, and Keon was our starting point. And I liked that right out of the gate. He just did a good job providing switchability because the defense to start this game was awesome. The Kings went on a really nice early first quarter run. I think they were up 20-4 at one point, and they were just being physical. And again, this was the trait from the Clippers game that we really saw in this Minnesota game, which is why I believe, the effort was just there all around. Everyone was being physical. They weren't like Domas was really doing a good job of pestering Rudy and Karl Anthony Towns at the same times. Like I think the narrative about Domas is kind of crazy because he's improving. He's proving this year. I don't think the offensive rebound issue is going to be a thing in this postseason. I think if anything, he's creating that problem for other teams.
Yeah.
Domas is fighting with everyone. I don't think a Kevon Looney would get to him this year. I think it's the way he got stronger. He's understanding things a little bit more, playing the true center position, because I also think that in his time in Indiana, he was playing the 4. He was kind of the Karl Anthony Towns over there, even though
Right.
Miles Turner was the better shooter. But Domas that was his first full season as a starting 5, playing with the big boys the whole time. So I think now he's gotten used to it, and I think that's the reason he's the league leader in rebounds. Like I think that for the second straight year now, or was he? He was.
Yeah.
Yeah, he led last year too. So, but he improved. So I think that it's going to be a thing that if we watched him match up against a smaller big or a lighter big, that you're going to see Domas kind of win that matchup based off of his physicality alone. So
Yeah, and another thing too is he has 2 hands now. Last year
exactly.
he had a fractured left thumb, which is his shooting hand and his dominant hand, and so he was being forced to his right hand a lot more, and that was when you can't use your dominant hand and everybody knows what hand you're going to go to at that point. Like it's tough to
It's
get
one-sided.
your offense
Yeah.
going, and especially to come down with a board consistently. So yeah, I feel like this season too, like I talked about it last year, just we didn't have the pod last year, but just with you and Ryan, talked about how Domas, it just seems like he doesn't attack other bigs that he should as often as we want him to. And this year, I look at matchups against like Zubac in this last matchup, this last time around, like he realized he's been struggling this year with Zubac, and he took it to him and he won that matchup. And
Yeah.
we talked about last episode his crazy streak against what was it, Karl Anthony Towns, Jokic, and
Davis.
Anthony Davis.
Yeah.
And obviously now Jokic has gotten a game on him, but he's still, what was it, like 8-1 against
Now.
all those
Yes.
guys now.
So 8-1 now.
So you talk about that, bringing it against the best centers, but you also got to bring it against the bad centers. And I think we've seen that from him at this point, obviously talking about his 42 straight games of double doubles and leading the league in double doubles and triple doubles. Like you're seeing him pretty consistently dominate games. And that's something we didn't necessarily see last year. That's something we didn't see him do in the playoffs. And I agree with you. I think that this postseason is going to be a different story if we can get to a spot we want to be in, and get a matchup that works really well for our team.
Yeah.
I think Domas is going to put us in great positions to win. I don't think that offensive rebound, even defensive rebounds, is going to be an issue. Obviously, we'll reassess that
Right.
depending on matchup. But I talked about last episode too how the Timberwolves, we kind of broke down the schedule going forward. Um, the Timberwolves, when they have Karl Anthony Towns, it seems like we're the better team, and those were the games that we won against them. And then when Cat was out the last time around, they dominated us. And I think that there's an identity issue for the Timberwolves, is even though they're the first seed in the West and they're playing damn good this season. I do think when both Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert are on the floor together, there's a little bit of a identity issue for them, and they kind of don't. They still are feeling out that whole scenario and situation there. Um, but Cat was in this game. Domas was in this game. Domas got the upper hand of the both of them, and we won the game.
Yeah.
So from that standpoint, like matching up against the Timberwolves, and I think was it Jaden McDaniels said something interesting after the game. I don't know if you heard this. So
Nah.
they asked him about a potential scenario of playing the Kings in the playoffs. Jaden McDaniels is a forward on the Timberwolves, and they asked him about potentially matching up with the Kings, and he said, "I'm not really that worried. I think we could beat them 4 straight games." And I laugh at that. Obviously, Jaden had a career night last night. Shout out to him. He played 45 minutes, 26 points, 7 rebounds, and 1 assist, and that was a career high in points for him. But it's funny to hear that because when I look at so far this season, we're 2-1 against the Timberwolves. I think we play them one more time. Is that right?
No, I think we
Or
only
is
get
that
three.
it?
I think we get three against them. Yeah, I think that was
Yeah,
it.
I think that's right. So we've won the tiebreaker. Not that there is one, but we won it, right? We won the season
Mm-hmm.
matchup. And we've proven that even at your strongest Minnesota Timberwolves, we can beat you, and we're not our strongest right now.
Yeah, this was
We're
without
missing
Fox.
De'Aaron Fox, and you haven't seen De'Aaron Fox in the postseason. So I would say, step on the brakes a little bit, Jaden, but I do like the competitive nature. You're probably feeling good. You're coming off career high. Your team's in first place in the West, obviously by a half game with OKC. But this is the time of the year where these teams show true identities. And I think the
Mm-hmm.
Timberwolves are going to slide a little bit. I don't think they'll end first. I think they'll probably end second. But obviously we'll talk about standings coming up. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, it was a good game. And shout out to Malik Monk. So Monk played 33 minutes. He had 39 points, 4 rebounds, and 4 assists. Marcos, you texted Ryan and I. No, you texted our Alex, our buddy
Yeah.
Alex, and I, and you said something. I can't quite remember what it was. What did you say?
So I guess for lack of a better term, I was like, Monk is playing like us right now. In the first half, he had 4 points, a couple turnovers. He was really sloppy, and he was playing like us, for lack of a better term. And I said that we need him to play better, or we're not going to win this game. And lo and behold, the second half, he heard, Mike Brown showed him my text, and he got 35 points in the second half, and that's where, again, it further proves the point that sometimes, especially we had no Foxy, our offense in general was doing a good job. It was because our offense was being fueled by our energy on the defensive end. Everyone did a good job, and this is where Keon starting was great, because early on Keon he had 4 steals in this game in general, but he did a really good job just kind of running the offense and letting the guys do their thing. And Domas
Yeah,
again did a good job just being a bully. And we watched in instances with Monk in this second half where this is how, if we were to get matched up with them in the playoffs, how we could essentially play Rudy Gobert out of the game in the playoffs, because there was instances, especially when it was kind of ISO ball, but it was mainly just Malik running 2-man games with Trey and Domas and just running back and forth and just
yeah,
trying to get whatever open shot he could. It was his night. He was hot. But especially towards the end, it was like 117, 120. And Rudy he's miscommunicated with Nas Reed, and they were trying to not understand these things because he's not used to guarding up top, and he was trying to sink back down, and he just let Monk get a wide open shot, and it's just to tie it up, and it was it's in these games where I'm like, Rudy is a non-factor. Yeah, he'll get a board or two, and maybe he'll get a good defensive block, but we can spread the floor enough to give him a problem. And when we go into overtime, Domas fouls out early in overtime. And while we were without our superstar point guard and our superstar center, if there's one narrative that has been proven is that Malik Monk in overtime is a certified winner in overtime. Like Malik Monk hit 3 buckets in overtime, and he did miss 2 clutch free throws. And free throws in this game, like if there was one true negative in this game, it was going 13 for 24 from the free throw line. That's
Yeah.
disgusting. That's
God, that's
awful.
terrible.
That's 55%. Like, even if we shot at 70%, we would have won that game in regulation. And it's those kind of things that in the playoffs, that's what would kill us. It wouldn't, it like that was tough. Like, and I don't think this is a fixable issue. I think this is what the Kings are right now. And I don't know how they're going to fix that. I don't even think the team knows how they're going to fix that. It's like, I don't even know if they dedicate one whole practice to just shooting free throws all day, if that would do anything, you know? So
Yeah.
it's frustrating, but that doesn't take away from the fact that Malik and the guys stepped up without both of their stars when it mattered most, and they did a good job. And they still, and Anthony Edwards did leave halfway through this game, and it wasn't an ankle injury. They said it was for personal reasons. So I don't know. Do you know?
So yeah, he let's just say congratulations, Anthony Edwards. He is now a father of his firstborn.
Okay, so
So he
that's what
left at
happened.
halftime. He wasn't. So I said they were playing at full strength, the Timberwolves. I
Mm,
did forget about that. Anthony did leave at halftime to go welcome his baby
got it.
into the
Okay.
planet for the first time, but he wasn't necessarily playing amazing. Like
No,
he
we were
wasn't
we
going
were
to be
doing
the
good.
reason why the Timberwolves win or lose. He wasn't a factor for them. The
Mm-mm.
Kings were doing a really good job of containing him and also forcing him to pass the ball. And that's something that teams have struggled with Anthony Edwards because he is a star and he will
Yeah.
be one of the faces of the league moving forward. So someone you got to pay attention to night in and night out.
But congrats. I did not know. I wasn't sure. When they
Yeah,
said personal reasons, I'm like, it's either a death in the family or a birth in the family. So it's one of those things that's what he's like, we're first in the West as the Kings. I can go leave and go
right.
watch my kid be born. No, but hey, shout out to him. That's awesome. I'm glad it was
Cool.
good news, not bad news. That's awesome. So,
Definitely.
but yeah, so he was gone in the second half. And honestly, like Ben mentioned, we were being physical on him all game. So his presence was not really felt. They did a really good job of aggravating him the whole game, which was great. Um, and again, this was a gritty win, and this was almost a must win in a vibes way for the Kings.
Oh
Because
yeah.
had we gone 1-3 this week, this would have been tough. We would have fallen to eighth. I mean, we were eighth to begin with, but we would have fallen to we're still eighth, but we would have fallen even further. And the Warriors and the Lakers are coming. So now all of a sudden, so let's, any final takeaways from this game before we transition over to just kind of the standings and what we're seeing in the upcoming weeks here.
No, it was a really good win, much needed, and it's always I talked about it when we talked about the 17 home games and 10 away games. Like any away game that you can get right now, it gives you a little bit more of a cushion at home. So
Yeah.
really good to get a win on the road.
Yeah, and we're also the only team so far this season to beat Minnesota at home twice. So
Oh, I didn't know that. I know
so
they have a really good home record. They're
yeah, they've
22
only
and 7 at home
there
this
we
year.
go. Yeah, so we've beaten them twice. We're the only team to do that so far this year. So it's
That's
just
cool.
we're not afraid of Minnesota. So but that matchup probably won't happen unless it's in the second round because I mean actually who knows
Well,
because so let's get into the standings. We're not going to go over like super far in advance, but for this week the Kings play the Bulls on Monday, the Lakers on Wednesday. So they have a back-to-back. They play San Antonio at home and then they play the Rockets on Sunday. So with these next 4 games, they're all winnable, right? Like we've beaten the
this
Bulls,
is
it was a
yeah.
close game, and the Lakers. That's a huge one. Even though we've had their number recently, still a huge game. We'll see if Domas can continue his streak versus Anthony Davis. And um, the Spurs gave us a good run for our money at home last time. Who knows what that strat will be? And we haven't beaten Houston yet this year because we lost them in that back-to-back early on. But I think that we're in a better we're better equipped to handle them this time, I think, with what we have. Um, how do you feel about this week in particular? What record do we need to have?
So you named 1, 2, 3, 4 games. We need to be
Mhm.
4-0. This is the stretch of the season. You have not given yourself as a team in the standings any cushion, any room for error. And you have a great chance to come home, play 3 games at home, and one that's just down I-5 8 hours. And that's like, if there's a chance right now to flip the standings, flip your um uh your, what's the word I'm looking for? Your
Things.
like, get rolling, you know what I mean? Like,
Oh,
if
okay.
there's a
Create a
chance to
cushion.
really get going, yeah, and give yourself a little bit of cushion, like this is the chance to do it. Um and yeah, like especially a win against the Lakers, LA's gonna be ready to go. We know they're right behind us in the standings. Um and it's there's just so many must win games.
Yeah,
And I'm looking at a little bit past this week. We won't necessarily break it down, but um the next 9, 10 games are super winnable. Like,
yeah,
the hardest game we play will be the Bucks.
yeah,
And that one, we in our last matchup, we just couldn't make our free throws. And if we made our free throws, Dame Lillard would have never hit that game winner on us.
yeah,
So there's this is the chance to really put yourself in a position to excel and make a push at the playoffs. Not a play in spot. You're not trying to position yourself for the play in. That at this point you need to believe you're a better team than the play in. And they are.
they are.
They haven't proved it, but you look at this team on paper, and you look at what this team is capable of when they're rolling, and this team should not be a play-in team.
Agreed.
Like, when I look at the NBA standings right now, from 1 to where we're at 7, we got the Timberwolves, the Thunder, the Nuggets, the Clippers, the Suns, and the Pelicans. I personally believe we're a better team than the Pelicans, even though we don't match up against them well. I still think that we're a better team than the Timberwolves, but they are the first seed in the West. Um, the Suns, like, it's pretty close, honestly. Like, KD's still a star, but he's a little bit older. He's a vet. Like, he's
Can
got
they
to
stay
have a
healthy?
little bit less role, right? The health issue is a thing. Devin Booker will always torch you, like, night in and night out, but even he has struggled to stay on the court this year. Clippers, it's a health thing. Like, Nuggets, they're kind of inconsistent this year, but they're still a good team. But the Kings, like, it's just the consistency thing, guys.
Yeah,
You show up for, if they won the games that they were supposed to win this year in terms of not blowing leads, making free throws, and just doing the easy things, this team would have 8 to 9 more wins, and we'd be talking about the third or fourth seed in the West.
yeah,
And
and
that for
yeah,
me is super frustrating as a fan, because you then would have a little bit of a cushion, and you'd be talking about having home court advantage versus not having home court advantage, rather than play in versus playoff.
yeah,
And that's just a completely different story. So solidifying yourself, giving yourself a chance to not talk about the play in anymore in this next 4 games this week, but 10 games going forward, huge.
huge.
I want to be
And
10-0.
yeah.
We won't be 10-0, but I want to be 10-0.
No, I agree. And this is what I was stating earlier. Like even when we were losing, given the other teams' schedules, I don't think that there's going to be anybody who, considering like everyone in our range, and now the range has increased, right? So it's no longer 5 to 8; it's now 5 to 10. Like everyone in that range is catchable and gettable. Like if the Warriors and Lakers peel 3 straight wins, we're gonna fall, or someone's gonna fall. And
Yeah.
when you look at, so Dallas obviously lost to Boston, right? Their next few games, they got the Sixers, the Pacers, the Heat, the Pistons, the Bulls, and the Warriors, Thunder, Nuggets. Like they have some winnable games, but they also have been inconsistent. So it's like no guaranteed wins there. When you go to Phoenix, they got, so they play the Rockets today. They got the Thunder tomorrow, so they got a back to back. Then they play the Nuggets, then they play the Raptors, then they play the Celtics, the Cavs, the Celtics again. So it's like
Jeez.
those are tough games. Then you
Yeah.
go to the Pelicans. They got Let me make sure. They got the Raptors. They got the 76ers. They got the Hawks. They got the Cavs, Clippers, Trailblazers, and Nets. So they have some easy ones in there, but they also have some tough games too. And then when you look at the Lakers have the Nuggets today, the Thunder on Monday. Then they got us, the Bucks, the Timberwolves, then us again, and then the Warriors. So that's a tough stretch for the Lakers. Then you got the Warriors who play the Celtics tomorrow, the Bucks, the Bulls, two easy games against the Spurs potentially, and then the Mavs, the Lakers, and Knicks. So it's like also semi tough. So there's opportunities for every team, but there's also another opportunity to slide. So I don't think there's anyone who's really going to separate themselves unless they win 4 or 5 straight. And
Yeah.
I also just don't see that happening given the way all of these teams have played, us included. And that's tough. If we can walk out of this 3-1, because I'm nervous on what game was I most nervous for? I'm nervous for the Houston game just because we haven't beaten them on Sunday. But
Hmm.
there's no back to back potentially with San Antonio. We could come out flat on Thursday night. So who knows? It's we need to win. Especially the game that matters the most in this scenario is the Laker game because they are the ones who are closest to us and they are the ones that could impact our standing the most should we lose to them. We have beaten them already twice this season, so we still own the tiebreaker, but we play them again the following week. So they could very well creep up the standings and steal our spot. I just I'm nervous about us because it sounds easier said than done, but we've just been inconsistent, and these things are that are plaguing us have been plaguing us all year, and there's no sign that they're changing. And the win without Fox was huge. Like that was arguably the win that kind of saved us from
Yeah.
falling even further. And it allowed with some of the teams like the Pelicans and the Suns losing, it's allowed our ceiling to it hasn't raised yet. So it's still at a
Right.
reachable 1 win, 1 game, 1.5 games out type of level. So we can hang in there. And I'm not too nervous about that. It's just when is Fox coming back? I'm glad we have the weekend off. Hopefully he's back on Monday. But the Bulls are a team we could beat without him as much as I'd like him there. He does really well against the Bulls consistently. So it depends. It really does depend. I'm not sure how to feel, but I know that all these other teams around us are in a tough spot too. So
Yep.
the goal's still the same: avoid the play-in and take whatever first round matchup you get. Because honestly, I'm not. I don't care anymore at this point. Like I'm not afraid as a fan. I just want to see who we're gonna get, and at that point, just go from there. We've beaten every team above us at this point, except for New Orleans. And we will get one more chance with them later. But we've beaten every other team that's above us, and we've beaten every team that's below us in the standings, like in the top 10 at least. And so I'm not afraid of anybody at this point. I just kind of want to see what we got, and we can assess it from there.
Yeah. And the word I was looking for earlier was momentum.
Oh,
So
okay, yeah,
let me build some momentum off of this word for a second. So we talk about the inconsistency. This is a great stretch to win a bunch of games, build momentum. With momentum comes confidence, and with confidence will come consistency. And that's something that I think if you really want to turn your season on a completely different note, flip it upside down in a good way, in a positive way, this is the stretch to do that. So let's I don't want to be talking in 2 weeks from now about how we went 2-8. Like
yeah,
I want to be talking about going 8-2,
yeah.
going 10-0, at least getting some wins that we should really be stacking.
Agreed. Stacking wins is huge, and it does feel like now a one game at a time scenario. Like
Yes.
we are, we're so close to ascending and we're also so close to falling. And listen, in a play-in scenario, it is what it is and you just hope for the best and then you go from there. But, you know, I just I want to avoid that at all costs, and we'll find out more like as the season progresses, as the stretch run comes to a close. But I just wonder, now I'm nervous again for how healthy really is Fox. Were they just taking it easy this week because they can? Because this is the last chance that he has to really rest if they need him to before just kind of pushing through whatever other injuries he may have.
Yeah.
I just, It's nervy. It's a little bit unnerving to me. Like I'm a little nervous, but we'll see. It starts again on Monday. This new week starts on Monday, and we just got to go stack some wins. So
Yeah, and regarding the Fox injury, I'm speculating that this is the last chance that you have to rest anybody who is banged up, because we talk about being in the last 20 games and how crucial it is because you haven't given yourself a cushion, yada yada yada. This was the last chance to really like give your guy a chance to get over what is bugging him. And
yeah.
I saw him live time smash his knee, and I was like, like that could be a thing going forward. You texted me on, what was that, Wednesday, when it was the first game he was questionable for,
Mhm.
and you asked about scenario wise, like, would you rather rest him? Would you rather, play him? And I told him, like, if he feels like, what did I say? It was if he's 20% or less likely to re-injure it or aggravate it more, play him. But if there's any chance, over 20%, don't even risk it. Because
Yeah.
at this point, that, as inconsistent as Fox has been at times, he's still arguably the best player on the team. And it's an any given night kind of thing. From a consistency standpoint, Domas has been the best player all season long, but Foxy is the bucket of this team. He's the
Mhm.
guy who's going to go and get you 40, on majority of nights.
Yeah.
Like, especially on a stretch run and especially games that have a lot more weight to them, that's the guy you lean on because he's
Yeah.
proven in those games he brings it. He's ready to go. He's going to prove he's the best player on the court, not just on his team.
Yeah.
So, yeah, giving Fox that little bit of rest, I speculate it's not as serious as it could seem. I think it's just this is the last chance to really get Fox as healthy as he can be before this final stretch when we need him for every single game and we need his best.
Agreed. Okay. Well, then we're gonna hope for the best, and we'll probably be back next. We'll probably record next Friday after kind of the week goes through, and then we'll follow up and just kind of hope that we're talking about us being in sixth place or fifth place, and how we can build from there. But any final
Yes.
thoughts on this team before we go?
Nah, man, let's just go. Let's do this. Let's make this run right now. It starts here.
Exactly. Starts on Monday. We're gonna kick it. Hopefully we can light the beam all week long, and we'll be in a good spot. So with that being said, this was episode 31 of the Behind the Back podcast. You can hit us up at behindthebackpod13@gmail.com. Hit us up on any of our social media: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, X, Facebook. And you can find us on YouTube. Like, subscribe, leave a comment, and rate the show on any of the audio platforms. Leave any comments or reviews as well. We would really appreciate it. And let us know who you guys think are your favorites for the stretch run, who'd you like to match up with, any of that fun stuff so we can jibe with you guys. But I'm Marcos Conan Grown, and beside me here, as always, is
Benny the Jet Reds. We love y'all. We appreciate y'all. Let's go light the beam.
Light the Beam, baby. Peace.
Peace.